Whenever you see a big change in your life or the world around you, there's a tendency to want to look at a lot of different angles. You might categorize that as overthinking. But when you're overthinking, you're not just analyzing, you're freezing and you're second guessing and ultimately holding yourself back. That can look a lot like self-sabotage. But self-sabotage, you may not realize, actually is a lot like a lack of self-trust. So in this video, we're going to go through three primary psychological reasons why even smart people will self-sabotage and how to overcome that block that tends to look a lot like overthinking, but really is just masquerading self-sabotage. The first thing that I think is really, really interesting in this is that we tend to trust the familiar more than the unknown. So throughout our lives, whenever we're going to do something, we'll tend to do things that we know a lot more than things that we don't know, because unknown requires us to release something that we hold very, very dear to our hearts, which is control. We want to control the outcomes the best that we can. It's one of the reasons why we think through so many different options when it comes to whatever path we can take. And the more intelligent you are, the more paths that you have and the more opportunities that you have. And that can kind of turn into something that I like to call the chaos of abundance, where there's too many things to pick. And so we analyze all these different things, realizing that we have to give up control into the unknown of what all these things are. And so this really, when we've got that desire to control everything, the game becomes about what are we willing to let go of? And if we can just let go of our desire to feed our own ego in controlling the outcome of whatever we're doing, we allow life to lock into place. It is very, very different to be strong versus be flexible. I spent so many years trying to figure out how to become stronger and stronger, both mentally and physically, so I could resist. But the older I've gotten, the more that I've realized that flexibility is way better than strength, not just in my body, because as I get older, it's nice to walk around, not be in pain all the time, but really in the way the world works. It's much better to be flexible than be strong, because the world and the universe, they're going to do what they're going to do. It is not possible for a human to become strong enough to resist those forces. So it's better to be flexible, knowing that it's going to do what it's going to do. You're much better off being able to move with it than try to control how you move through it. But the unknown is something that we've got to allow into our lives. And to do that, we've got to let go of control. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that if you talk to people that are like, I don't know, I just kind of like let go and it came to me, I wasn't paying attention, the best things that could possibly happen and the outcomes that were beyond what they would have wanted if they wanted to control it are usually the things that show up. And so letting go of what you think is the thing that you want in terms of the outcome, that's often the doorway to creating an even better outcome that you couldn't have possibly fathomed. And the reason for that is your mind is limited based on your perception of the world around you and ultimately what's possible for you. But there's so much more that you don't know that could be possible for you if you're willing to let go of your idea of what your ideal outcome looks like. There's this chart, and I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a pie chart, and it's like what you know, and it's a small little sliver of the pie chart. Then there's a bigger portion of the pie chart, which is what you know you don't know. So all the things that you like need somebody to teach you, but you know that you don't know them, that's it. The biggest portion of that chart is what you don't know you don't know. The things where you don't even know the right question to ask. So when you're trying to control the outcome and having to step into the unknown, realize that that's the biggest piece of the pie that's available to you in that chart anywhere on Earth or in the cosmos for that matter. And so the more that you can let go, the more you get to access all of that. So letting go is the first way that we can kind of overcome this deal where we're thinking way too much and ultimately holding ourselves back and sabotaging ourselves. The second thing that kind of subconsciously holds us back is this thought of what I kind of use as an analogy as a thermostat. If you're comfortable in your house at, let's say, 72 degrees, and you turn the thermostat up to 82 degrees, you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to start sweating. It's just not going to feel right. And you're going to want to turn the thermostat back down to 72. Take that analogy and put that into any progress you're trying to make in your life. How much money you have or how fit you are. We'll pick whatever area of your life you want. You're conditioned right now to have normalcy at whatever degree you're operating at. Picture that as the 72 degrees in the analogy. Anything above that, and you can tend to get uncomfortable, and it's not because of tactics, it's because of emotions. So to unpack that idea a little bit further, whenever we want to make a change in our lives, in any area of our lives, the first thing that we usually do is we think about tactically, how do I go from where I am right now all the way to where I want to go? And we tend to look at it in a progression and steps and things that we have to actually do. But like most people, they don't achieve what they want to achieve when they want to go from where they are to where they want to be. It's because they don't look at the emotional process that is going to take place along their own journey. Now, there's this thing that psychologists will call the emotional cycle of change. That's a good name. There are 4 distinct phases to it. They had names for it. I changed the names because I thought it would be better. Picture this, where we start out in this phase where we're fired up. Like that's the first phase. And anytime you want to make a change, you are fired up. You're thinking about the possibility of how cool it's going to be. Let's take fitness, for example. Around January 1st, a lot of people say like, all right, this is the year I'm going to get fit. They're fired up. They buy new shorts. They buy new running shoes. They get a new gym membership. And they're like, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to lose the 20 pounds that I've been telling people that I'm going to lose for the last 5 years. They get to that stage and they're fired up. Then they get to the next stage. And this is where I changed the name. The next stage in the emotional cycle of change is called fucked up, because you start to feel fucked up about everything that you're going to have to do to ultimately achieve what you want, because you're seeing the reality of all the effort it's going to take. And you start to tell yourself, man, this is going to be really difficult. I don't know if I've got the staying power and the stamina, plus all the self-doubt starts to creep back up from when you tried it before. And you start to feel fucked up about this goal. Maybe I shouldn't have told all those people that I was going to lose this 20 pounds. But don't worry, the emotional cycle of change gets worse, because once you pass fucked up, you get to what's called the trough of despair. And everybody thinks they get to the trough of despair way too early, but they're usually in the fucked up stage. The trough of despair is where we feel like nothing's going right, despite all of our best efforts. And no matter what we try or what we do, then nothing meaningful is happening in terms of our progress. Now, the trough of despair, it's a really dangerous spot because of the stories we start to tell ourselves when we get there. And we start to tell ourselves that it wasn't so bad back where I started before I had this idea that I was going to create some form of change in my life. It wasn't so bad back there. It wasn't so bad being overweight. It wasn't so bad being broke. It wasn't so bad being alone, because it's not like this. That's the emotional feeling that we have when we're in the trough of despair. And every now and then we'll fight through that, and we'll get to the 4th stage, which is the lift. And that's where every single challenge that we could have had is behind us. And what we want is virtually inevitable. But that emotional cycle of change happens every time we're making any sort of a change in our lives. And so it's not that it is tactical in how to get from where we are now to where we want to go. That's the baseline level of it. If tactics were all that you needed, then you would get every single thing that you want, because there's an unlimited resource for being able to figure out the tactics of how to do something. We can look at the AI models, the language models, and we can get information on how to do just about anything. And if that doesn't work, we can look at it on YouTube. There's tons of resources out there. If tactics were all that you need, you'd have everything you want, but it's not tactical, it's emotional. And so not preparing yourself emotionally for the changes that you want to make, that you perceive to be good, because you're not making changes because you're like, hey, you know what? It'd be awesome if I changed my life and I lost a whole bunch of money and I got fat and I ended up alone. Like, nobody's saying that. Like, that's not how it works. But if you emotionally prepare yourselves for the things that you think are going to be better in your life, and realizing that you are going through phases emotionally as you're moving along tactically, then it gets much easier to push through all the tactics and essentially affect the change that you want. This gets you through overthinking. Did you notice that, right? In the trough of despair, that's where you're overthinking the most. You're telling yourself, man, it wasn't so bad back there. It wasn't so bad being broke, overweight, alone. Like it wasn't so bad, like whatever it was before you started. That's overthinking. And that's what overthinking lends itself directly to self-sabotage. Because when we're overthinking, we're also freezing. And when we're freezing, we're not really helping ourselves. And so that's holding ourselves back. Now, you can call that subconscious, you can call that conscious. Doesn't really matter. What I'm most interested in, just looking at the behavior of human beings, is what effect it actually had. And the effect it most often had is something that is a lot worse than it was when it started. So that's the second thing. Let's get on to the third thing that people will really use to overanalyze, overthink, and ultimately turn into self-sabotage. And that is that the fear of failure or success is really neither one of those. It's the fear of becoming someone unfamiliar to who you know as yourself right now. So you might have told people or thought, probably don't say this out loud, that you've got a fear of failure or a fear of success. And both of those things, they're very, very challenging, right? One of the things, fear of failure, that attacks your ego. If you've had success in the past and you're struggling to do the next thing that would make you more successful than you are, one of the reasons that could be holding you back is this fight for your ego to identify with being successful. If you've had a streak of being that way and having things just work out for you, and now you've got the possibility of them not, that is a direct attack on your identity and your ego as a successful person. And so it can be really scary to take some actions that you feel like might benefit you, because the risk now has to do with what you believe to be true about yourself. That's the fear of failure. The fear of success, it's not really the surface level fear of success, because nobody, as far as I can tell, in the 8 billion people on the planet are going to sit there and go, I'm really scared of having too many Ferraris in my garage. That seems like a big problem to me. I'm scared of that. I don't want that, right? They're not doing that. So fear of success isn't the fear of like material success. It's the fear back to the identity of who you might become with that success. You probably know somebody in your life, or at least know of somebody in your life who's been ruined by apparent success. Maybe their morals completely change, or maybe they don't have time to do the things that they used to do, or they're completely tied up in materialism when they were actually like a depth of a person before. And that can be really what happens when we say we have a fear of success. We have a fear of who that person might be. Now, back to the emotional cycle of change. You can kind of manage that by understanding the emotions that are going to go along with it. I won't belabor that point, but that can be one of the things. For purposes of this problem, really think about, what differences you have made in who you've become in your life up to the stage you're at right now. There are a lot of different iterations of you. There was you as a kid and the things that you were into and that mattered to you and seemed meaningful and seemed important. Then there were the same category of things when you were in your adolescence. Then there were the same things when you were in your late teens and early 20s and 30s and then late 30s and early 40s. All those things, you changed who you were, each one of those phases of your life. And so if there is a fear of success or fear of failure, which ultimately ties down to the fear of who you're going to become, one of the ways that we can recognize that we can push ourselves past it is recognizing that who we've become in the past is essentially like a puzzle piece. We've put little puzzle pieces together the whole time that have ultimately created the whole vision of who you are. And each change that you've made, probably you feel like you're in a better spot than you were. The puzzle gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the picture gets clearer and clearer and clearer because we're building this puzzle from the inside out. We're not doing the frame first. We're building it inside out. And when we build the frame inside out, we get to see so much more of ourselves. But that requires us to be able to become somebody new, because you are going to need to be somebody new in order to navigate the unknown fields that are beyond whatever state your life is in right now. So all these things that look like overthinking, they can produce a lot of fear inside of us. But most of the time, fear, when we stack it up to our evidence, and our evidence being just the history of how we've dealt with the unknown and the fear of change in our lives in the past, that's often enough to help us realize that our overthinking is really just a trap we're creating ourselves based on the fear. But if we look at our past performance, most often we're going to find that we performed really well in the face of that fear, in the face of that change. And the evidence of that is where you're sitting right now. Whether you're sitting in a $50 million house overlooking the ocean, or you're sitting in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in middle America, like wherever you are right now, I want to remind you that that's something that you once wanted. That was a goal that you had. You have it now. It might seem boring and ordinary because you got used to it, but in reality, you're sitting in a really good spot. That tells me that you've gotten over the overthinking and self-sabotage at some point in the past. And that sounds to me like evidence that you can do it again. Thanks for watching this video, guys. I'll see you on the next one.